right. We'd like to welcome everybody to this week's episode of Only a Missionary Podcast. I'm your host, Clark Robinson, and this week I have a very, very special guest.
How you doing, everybody? Name's David DeJesus. I've known Clark for a long time, and I'm just happy to be here, and I'm happy for the opportunity to share in this journey for him.
Yeah, I'm very happy too. And I don't know how much we'll dive into this, but David and I remember very clearly being about 5 years old in primary, and there was a new family in the ward, and in walked, for what would be my best friend, all the way up until today. We're still good friends, and very, very happy for you to be on here and share some stories with us today. So that's a really cool.
Yeah.
So I already know all this stuff, but our audience, I'm sure, would like to hear about this. Why don't you tell us about your family as it is right now?
Okay. So I've been married to my beautiful wife Emily for almost 20 years now. We have 3 kids. Dylan, who's a junior in high school, 17, just got his driver's license yesterday.
Wow!
So,
all right.
Yeah. Nervous about that, but we're happy that he's progressing. So Dylan, we have Ariana, who's 14. She's also in high school. She's a freshman.
Oh.
And then my youngest, Cooper, who's in 6th grade. So great family. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. Yeah, big family. I think it's typical from the church, but big family.
Yeah. I loved going to your, like I said, we grew up together. I loved going to your house because there was always all your siblings, there was always someone else to talk to or hang out with. And especially when your brothers could drive, sometimes they would drive us places and have fun. But
yeah.
So you kind of touched on it. You're one of 7, but why don't you tell us about, your family growing up? Tell us if they, were they members of the church, and
okay.
What were Sundays like?
Yeah, so we are, I guess my mom was first generation, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She joined the church in 1964 in the World's Fair in New York. The missionaries had a booth up there, and her and my grandma actually stopped by the booth. They spoke with the missionaries. They had them come over and give them the lessons, and both she and my grandmother were baptized members of the church. Fast forward a couple years later, my dad and so they grew up in the Spanish Harlem in the Bronx, right, in New York. So
okay,
my dad was in the neighborhood too, and he saw her, and he wanted to marry her, but he wasn't a member of the church. He said, if you clean your act up and join the church and follow what I believe, we can get married. And so that's what he did. So he ended up getting married. They actually helped establish the Bronx branch. They were one of the first families in Bronx.
Wow.
There's a member of the church that still sends out newsletters to our family about where all the original members of the branch Bronx are now and how they're doing. And so he just sent me one this past Christmas, and just kind of a follow-up. There's a website dedicated to all the members there. And so they helped establish that branch. And then they, 1987 or 86, I think we moved down to Southwest Florida, where I met you and your family. And so my mom and dad, they were members of the church their whole lives. That's it. I mean, all because of the World's Fair. I'm here, as a member of the church. Yeah.
And going to church, that was just part of your week, right? It was never we're going to go today. It was just all right, it's Sunday, right? It's time to go to church, and Wednesdays, all that.
Yep. Sundays it was just kind of expected. It wasn't even an issue. I think I fought my mom once about going to church. I said, I don't want to go to church today. And she's like, fine, stay home. And she left. And I was so bored. I missed all my friends. And I didn't do that again. So she didn't threaten me or drag me along or make me. She was like, great, one less seat. 7 kids. So she didn't have time to to mess around.
Right.
But yeah, normal Sunday church, normal Wednesday activities, dances on the weekends occasionally. That was my childhood. It was a good childhood.
Yeah. It was fun. Felt like there was always something to do either at the church or with, like you said, we had a really good core group of friends that we just like doing fun, clean activities. So I look back very fondly on a lot of the things that we did growing up.
It was a good childhood.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. Why don't you let our audience know then some of the circumstances, like did you about wanting to serve a mission? Like, is it something you always wanted to do? Was it, did you come to like one day like, oh, maybe I should go? Or just tell us how did you come about doing that?
So I guess big influences in my life were my sister and brother. My sister served a mission in Italy, and my brother was in Chile. He served in Santiago, I think. And they were a big example in my life on just what I should do and serving. So it wasn't I never really questioned it. It was always just kind of like part of the plan. It was always just like the steps to growth. Like after high school, I was going to go on a mission. And then after that, I had no idea. And I was going to figure it out then. But that was kind of always the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's so much, and that's such a great point. There's so much of an outline of like, when you turn 12, you're a deacon. When you're 14, you're a teacher. And then, there's you become an Eagle Scout. You turn in your mission papers, and then you can, once you're done, kind of get lost if you, don't continue to make the good choices or continue to go to church. But our lives were definitely planned out. It was very easy to follow, especially, I, along with you, I had an older brother that was a great example. And it was just like, I'm going to do what they did because, they went and they had great experiences. And, why wouldn't I want to do that as well?
Yeah, exactly. So, it was pretty easy discussion. I mean, it was a no-brainer. I didn't really give it too much thought of like, I'm going on a mission. So yeah.
Very cool. And let us know where were you called to serve?
So I received a call to California, the Roseville mission, and I knew the exact day that I was going to get my mission call. I just had this feeling. I was like, today is the day. I knew it was coming today, and it did. So I went out to my mailbox. I was the only one home. Everybody was gone. I didn't even wait to get inside the house. I just opened it there on my front porch. Sometimes we make like a big deal of it when we read in a big party, like a reveal, like where we're going. And I don't know. I think this was like pre-Zoom and all that stuff. So I just opened it up and if I'm just being honest, I was like, reading the first lines, and I said out loud, I was like, California, like my sister went to Italy, my brother went to Chile, and I was going to California. So it was it was interesting. But Roseville mission. So the Roseville mission is basically it was when I was serving from the Sacramento, north of Sacramento, all the way up to the Oregon border. So we had all of the valley there and some of the Sierra Nevada mountains. But big area.
It's funny you say that too about California, because I've discussed this with several others who've appeared on the show. You just think when you open your call, like, oh, they're opening China. Oh, you think you're going to go to this exotic, out of the country, and like, oh, I'm so special. I'm one of the first people to go there, and just I don't know why we almost romanticize, in our head, like, oh, we're going to go to this awesome place.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a disappointment when you're like, oh, you're going to the States. You're like, okay.
I know. Yeah. And then I looked up.
Go ahead. What's that?
I looked up where I was going, and my sister lived in California, and so I knew I was going to where she lived. So it was interesting.
It's so funny.
Yeah. I had a lot of those same feelings. I thought I was going to go somewhere. I was like, surely my last name is a shoo-in for some South American country, which wasn't the case.
Man, that's funny. But while all of us that dreamed of going all these other, other places, I've yet to meet a missionary who's gone anywhere, especially those in the States, that said, "Oh yeah, it was." After they've gone for the 2 years, oh yeah, I wish I got called somewhere else. What does everyone always say? No, that was the best mission in the world, and I'm sure your attitude is very similar.
Yeah, no, it was a great mission. Honestly, there was so much growth and everything that came from it. Um,
Yeah,
it's all meant, part of the plan. So
yeah, yeah. Um, the thing because I wanted to go somewhere else, but the thing that I really liked about going stateside, and especially just being English speaking, was you could study the gospel day one in your language, and you could teach, at least okay. I mean, they didn't sound very good probably, but at least you could communicate and teach discussions to, I guess they're called friends now, to our friends. Whereas, you're learning language you might say 2 or 3 words and then kind of, oh, I wonder what they're talking about. I wonder what they're talking about. So there's advantages and disadvantages, but that's one of, I think, a huge advantage is being able to understand the gospel day one.
back when we were on our mission, they had the lessons that you would memorize and the discussions. Yep. There were 6 of them, and you would memorize them. Yep. And just basically regurgitate them back almost word for word. Yep. So teaching in another language, honestly, like I would just read it and not know what I was saying. I didn't grow up Spanish.
Oh, okay.
You could just read it, but I had no idea what I was saying. I was just reading words on a page, and hopefully, there was some sort of connection with the Spirit to that person, and they understood or felt that, something inside. But yeah, I just had those things memorized.
So you were a Spanish speaking missionary.
So I started off English, and about 6 months into the mission, my mission president decided that he says, Elder DeJesus, he says, your name tag would look good in Spanish. And so I got moved over to go speak Spanish in California for the rest of the time. So 18 months on the mission field. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge to learn in the States for me. Yeah.
Well, on top of that, plus you didn't have 2 months of here's how you learn Spanish, which is what everyone else I think normally has, no matter where you go, speaking Spanish.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't have any sort of formal training at all. My first Spanish companion, I was his second companion in the mission field. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was challenging, I guess, to say the least. It was the blind leading the blind, right? I was teaching him how to be a missionary, just that follow up from his trainer, and he was teaching me the fundamentals of speaking Spanish, and it was challenging. It was really easy to revert back to English instead of speaking your language. So
I'll bet. I'll bet. And then, but I'm sure as you look back, you're like, but somehow we made it work, right?
Somehow we made it work. I was looking through my old missionary letters that I wrote home to Mom, and I had, just this phrase that I would tell everybody that I don't speak any Spanish, but I'm trying. And I said in the letter, I'm like, I think I'm getting it, right? And now, little did I know, it was going to be a lot harder than I thought. Just this, light would descend upon me, and then all of a sudden I would speak Spanish. But I had to put some work into it, and it was challenging. There was definitely some growth there.
Yeah. I that's so funny. I couldn't agree more, because you think, well, I'm on a mission. I'm doing the Lord's work. Of course, I'm gonna have a dream, and when I wake up tomorrow, I'll just know Spanish. And
the
Lord,
and maybe that happens.
How the Lord works.
I don't know. Maybe there are some people that just like months into it, just flip that switch and everything works. For me, it wasn't. It took a long time for me to even speak like broken Spanish. But it was a good opportunity. It was a good growth. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. Spanish is, what a cool language to be able to teach people, especially on your mission. So, very neat. All right. So everybody, I feel like when you talk to return missionaries, there's always, everyone has that lighthearted or funnier story that happened to them or someone on their mission. And so we'd like to give you the opportunity now to maybe share one of those lighthearted or, kind of funny stories that happened while you were out serving.
So honestly, that would be it's been almost I don't know 20 years since I gone there, but that letter from my mom, just like I felt like I was so confident in learning the language that I just look back now and laugh at it, just how naive I was and yeah, how much I had to learn. So
were you so confident, like writing the letter to your mom? You're like, Mom, I think I'm getting it. Like this, it's clicking.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like, I think I'm gonna get it, and it
do you
was rough.
remember having a moment? Do you remember having a moment like after you wrote that letter, like, maybe I'm not getting it.
No, I it was just a lot of work. So
Okay.
I said my first companion in the mission, or Spanish speaking companion, I was the
Yeah.
second companion, and then my third, or excuse me, my second Spanish companion.
Yeah.
He came from El Salvador,
Huh?
and he didn't want to speak to me in Spanish. He wanted to speak English because English was his language. So
Oh.
it was yeah, it was just we just kept trying, and I would ask him questions, and he wanted to speak to me in English, and I wanted to speak to him in Spanish, and it was just it was a challenge. It was a challenge.
Yeah.
Um, and I did everything that I thought you were supposed to do, right? I had the two scriptures out, and I'm reading in Spanish and I'm reading in English, and it was just a lot of work, and I guess I just wasn't anticipating that much work. But I'm glad I went through it, and I'm glad I had that opportunity to put the work in, to grow and to learn. So
Yeah, for sure. That's trying to think. There's a movie about that. Remember the 70? I think he went to Hawaii or Samoa or Tonga or something, and that's what he did. Like
Other
all
Side
night
of
he read the
Heaven.
scripture. Other Side of Heaven, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
he
yeah.
did. He read the scriptures and
And I think it came out when we were on our mission. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I feel like we went on our mission president, like they were allowed everybody to see that movie, I think, on the mission, and so he authorized it, and we all went. So yeah, I think maybe that's where I got the idea. Was I was like, oh, that's a great idea.
oh,
Maybe I'll
okay.
just do both.
It is a good idea.
And yeah, eventually I was able to get through the lessons and start talking. And
So you didn't, like you said, you didn't have the formal training. I feel like most missionaries, when they learn a new language, I think for the majority, or I guess maybe the average, say it's about a year of doing it, and then I feel comfortable. Was that the same amount of time, or was it maybe a little longer? Since, like you mentioned, you didn't have that formal MTC experience of learning
yeah,
the language.
I'd say it was probably about 18 months for the rest of my mission. Was the how long it took
Oh,
me to
okay.
feel like semi comfortable speaking the language. Um,
Wow,
yeah, it was challenging. It was challenging, but
man.
yeah,
aren't
but
aren't mission presidents wonderful? They see potential in, you know what I mean? They see so much
yeah,
potential in us, and they challenge us, and so
yeah,
that's
yeah, 100%. I mean, it was so good for just to do hard things and just to struggle through. You grow so much during those times when you struggle and when you do hard things.
yeah,
That was it. So whether it was for me to learn the speak the language, or maybe just to put in work to work through a struggle or work through a hard time, who knows what my lesson, that could have been the lesson to learn. So
yeah, for sure.
but
So I mean, I'm sure there's times now you're going through hard stuff. You're like, well, at least I'm not up in Roseville trying to learn Spanish again. It could be
yeah,
worse.
just fumbling through for sure. And it's helped me on down the line too,
Yeah,
in various ways speaking language. So but yeah, it was good
yeah,
growth
for
opportunity.
sure. It's a very handy language to know
Yeah, yeah, especially here
these
these days.
days here.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very cool. All All right. Well, thank you for that. And then we'd also ask you, I'd like to ask you to, everyone has their favorite conversion story of, their favorite family, individual
Yep.
that they brought to the church. And just like to ask you to please share that with us now.
Sure. So we were on an assignment for the bishop. He wanted us to go check in on a member. And so we went to this house and knocked on the door, and we asked for the member, and a gentleman came and answered the door. And, we asked, hey, is this member here? And he says, no, he's not here anymore. You may have moved. And so we're like, well, hey, we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Can we share a message about God? And he's like, I'm atheist. We're like, oh, okay. Well, can we come in anyways and talk? So, he invited us in. He was super nice, and he invited us in, and we sat down there in his kitchen table, and we shared the first discussion, right? So at first about God, the Godhead, and those sort of things, kind of our beliefs, and then we introduced the Book of Mormon to him, and then we invited him to read. And he says, we got through what we had to say, and he's like, I'm going to read this book right now. Starting right now, I'm going to read the whole thing. And we're like, wow, amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
So we set up another appointment afterwards. I think we were coming back like 2 days later or something like that. We're like, hey, can we stop by in just a couple of days just to see how you're doing, how the reading's progressing? And he says, sure. And so we left, and then we came back a couple of days later, and we met with him, and we were sitting at his dinner table. And in the second discussion, back in the old second discussion, there was an invitation to be baptized. So before we even got to that, we asked him how his reading was going. We said, how's your reading? He says, great. I'm already in like the end of Second Nephi in just a couple of days. Like he would just read a ton of the scriptures. And before we got to the invitation, he asked us, he's like, will you baptize me?
What?
And so we were like he just kind of interrupted our lesson. And he's like, will you baptize me? And my companion and I, we were just absolutely floored. Never happened. And it didn't happen after that ever. Like nobody was ever that
right.
He was ready. Like he was just ready to go and to get baptized. Obviously the rest of the lessons went really smooth. And he ended up joining the church. And I was just so blown away by he was just prepared, right? So the bishop obviously was maybe inspired to have us go see that member, but maybe it was so that we could meet this gentleman. And we were just so blown away that he asked us to baptize him. He's like he was ready. And it was what a wild ride for a missionary. And I was new in the mission field. I think I had only been in there like a couple of months, and I was like, great, if this is what it's going to be like, this is amazing. Like I can't wait for the rest of the mission.
Missions are so easy. People ask you.
They ask you to be. And it never happened after that again. Nobody, it was like we always had to invite him, which was fine. But
of course.
It was an amazing experience. I mean, I think we taught him the lessons in just a matter of weeks, like 2 weeks or something like that. And then he was baptized in like a month. Like it was super fast, which wasn't common up in Northern California for us to teach and baptize somebody so quickly. But he was ready. So it was a wild ride. It was an awesome experience.
For sure, because it's such polar opposite beliefs. It's not like he opened the door and says, "Oh, I already have a church.
Yeah,
I love Jesus. I love God." I mean, I don't even believe they exist. I don't want them to exist. I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And for you to introduce him to them and him to be like, "Oh, that's who they are." Oh, well, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just going from atheism all the way over to, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints, like that's a huge, huge step in the right direction,
Yeah, that's a great story. That's awesome. What a cool thing to be part of.
Yeah, yeah, it was awesome.
And I'm sure, I just feel like something I've discussed with a couple other missionaries or, people on this podcast is how every once in a, or maybe every single person, but there's always especially a few people that you meet. You're like, this was the reason I got called to this mission, so I could meet this individual. And it could have been that, this is one of your people that's waiting for Elder DeJesus to come
Yeah.
and meet him. So
Yeah.
share your testimony with him. And so,
yeah,
very cool.
It was a neat experience.
That's
I'm
awesome.
blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's so cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. If someone was, something I like to ask is, if someone was like on the fence, like, I think I want to go, but I'm not entirely sure, what would be your maybe piece of advice, or what would you tell them that maybe to maybe, I don't know, convince is the right word, but convince them to serve a mission?
Yeah. I think, I heard somewhere, someone said one time, if you were to take everything spiritual out of being on a mission, it's still one of the best experiences for a young person, right? I mean, you're out doing things that are,
Wow.
in today's world, just highly unpopular, right? They're not the popular thing to do. They're not always widely accepted by a lot of people. Don't like for you to go, get in their face about religion. But if you just take everything spiritual away from it, it's still one of the best experiences for a young person to do. There's so much growth that happens out on the mission field, that prepares you for work, just prepares you to just marriage. It prepares you for life. You know how to survive on your own, how to just be self-sufficient. So just go. You're gonna look for that opportunity for growth, to learn, to do something outside of yourself, and move away from you being the center of your universe, right? Like you really want to serve, and
That's a good point.
Yeah. So yeah. So not only that, you take all that spiritual stuff away, still one of the best experiences, and then you just get to add all those special moments that you have with members of the church, with investigators and atheists moving over to members. Like, you get to have those experiences that are so unique, to such a small group, right? We don't have, if we look at the church globally, like, we still are just a tiny group of people. And there's so few individuals that get to have that 2-year mission experience. And it's so good. I would say just do it. Like, there's going to be challenges, and it's going to be hard at times, and just know that you can do hard things, and you can overcome. I think the lesson this past week in Come Follow Me, we're learning about Nephi, right? And he says, I'll go and do the things which the Lord commanded. For I know the Lord could give us no commandment, save, unto the children of men, and say these shall prepare a way for them to accomplish a thing she gives them, right? So just go and do the thing. Lord's on your side. He's going to be with you. He's going to be, guiding you and along the way.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, missions are hard. You get a lot of no's. You get a lot of, you're wasting your time, buzz off kid. And but then every once in a while you do get that person that wants to listen to you, and they do keep their commitments, and ultimately get baptized and go to the temple and do all that cool stuff. So it makes it totally worth it.
Definitely.
So, oh yeah, for sure. The Lord absolutely prepares a way for us to accomplish His work and accomplish His commandments. So what a mission is definitely a testimony builder for that, among a great many other things. So, all right, very cool. So, all right. Well, I would like to thank you for coming on today, Brother David DeJesus, and sharing your stories and a little bit about yourself with us. Um, for everyone else that's listening, if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can send me an email at clark@oampod.com, clark@oampod.com. And you can come on and be a guest, or if you're too busy to be a guest, but you have some cool stories or funny stories you'd like shared on the podcast, you can email me those things and I'll read them on a future episode. I think next week's episode is going to be the first episode where I'm going to share a couple stories from some of my friends who aren't able to come on the podcast, but they still have some stories that they'd like to share. So either way, we love missionary stories. They're uplifting or they can be lighthearted, and either way, they're my favorite things to listen to. So which is why I started this podcast in the first place. So again, I would just like to say, David, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming on and sharing that with us.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's been fun. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little of my memories. It was good.